Okay, this is our second unit, which is Introduction to Ecology. And in this unit, we have two objectives. The first is to diagram the flow of energy and nutrition through an ecosystem using food chains and food webs to include all trophic levels and identifications. The second objective is to analyze the function of nutrients in living things, including carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. So we're going to start with the first objective. So we're going to be learning how to diagram the flow of energy and nutrients through an ecosystem. You're going to be drawing food chains and food webs and including all of the trophic levels and identifications. Okay, so to start with, I just want to talk about the fact that all living things are interconnected and that the energy is flowing through the Earth's systems, starting with the sun. And all organisms are open systems, so they are constantly releasing energy into their environment, so they need to replace that energy. So we continually need to take in nutrients or take in energy. And the nutrients on the Earth are actually being cycled, and we'll learn those cycles in more detail in another unit. So to show you this a little silly video to show how living things are all interconnected, I'm not sure if there we go.
Yo, listen up. Yo, listen up. This is your home. It's the only one you got. This place is pretty, but you can't live there. You can't even get there. So I repeat, this is your home. It's the only one you got. Cherish it, protect it. It's the only one you're gonna get. These guys, they're your neighbors. They ain't going away. They ain't leaving. You have to get along with them. So you have to learn to share. You have to get along. You have to learn to get along. Because they are your neighbors. They're not going away. Okay, all this stuff, the animals, the waters, the sky, the ground, the bugs, the fish, the tacos, the people, they're all connected. Everything is connected. They all depend on one another. If you ignore that, you're doomed. Repeat, doomed. Okay, so listen up. It's all one. Not two worlds, not three, one. Just one. So get it in gear. Remember, all is one. Okay? Hit it.
Alright, so that's silly, but it kind of gives you the idea. Alright, so we're going to look at how energy flows through a system. So energy, the ultimate source of energy here on Earth is the solar energy or the sun's energy. Most of the living things, though, can't use that sun's energy. But there are groups of organisms that can. We call those the producers or the photosynthetic organisms. So all of our plants are able to use the sun's energy. They take in the sun's energy and they use carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, from the air, and they're able to make sugars. And then those sugars can be converted into fats or into proteins. And then other organisms will eat those producers, and then those in turn will get eaten by other organisms. And so we call the bottom of this the producers. And then the first consumers we call primary, kind of the first consumers. And then the secondary consumers eat the primary consumers, and the tertiary consumers eat the secondary consumers. One thing to note here, though, is that producers come first, and then we have the primary consumers. Sometimes students get mixed up and think it's the second step, so they want to call it secondary. But it's the first consumer, so they're the primary consumers. Okay, so if we start with the producers on that energy flow there, they're photosynthetic autotrophs, meaning that they can use the photons of light from the sun and synthesize or make their own food. And they're autotrophs because they're auto, they can do it themselves, autotrophic. So they make carbohydrates from carbon dioxide from the air and energy from the sun. And so we call that group the producers. There's another group of organisms that can make their own food, and they don't require light. We're not going to spend a lot of time talking about these guys, but you should be aware that there are a group of organisms that do what's called chemosynthesis. So these guys, they're living in these deep in the ocean, in these steam vents. It's very, very hot, very, very acidic. And these organisms, there's no light that makes it down this far, but these organisms can make their own food using some of the chemicals that are in the rocks here. And that's called chemosynthesis. Okay, the next group are the heterotrophs, and these are also considered the consumers, or heterotroph different. They have to eat other organisms. So they get their energy by eating, and we can group these into the herbivores, which eat plants, omnivores, which eat plants and animals, carnivores, which eat just animals, detrivores, which eat dead organisms, and decomposers, which break down dead decaying material and recycle it into the earth systems. So those are all the consumers. So now we can take these groups and we can organize them into these feeding relationships. So we can form a food chain. And that's just going to show us a single pathway of energy transfer. So we can start with the organisms that use the sun's energy, the plants, and then their energy is being transferred to the herbivore, in this case the grasshopper that's eating that plant, which in turn the carnivore is eating the herbivore, and that's the, eating the little grasshopper or little mouse here, and then the snake eats the mouse, and the hawk eats the snake. So this is just a food chain. This is a marine food chain, so we can look in the oceans and also see a food chain. Here we have a killer whale, and it's eating this smaller fish, and which is in turn eating even smaller fish. And then we can make it a little more complicated, and we can show a network of pathways, because this whale is not only eating just these kind of fish, it's eating other things, and these in turn are also eating other things. So we can make it a little more complicated. So here we have a food chain ending with our killer whale, and the killer whale's eating the leopard, and eating the leopard seal, which is in turn eating the cod. But a web actually shows us the much more complex system that actually exists. So the leopard seal is not only food for the shark, for the whale, but so is this other seal, and this other seal, and this leopard seal is not only eating cod, but it's also eating squid and whatnot. So here's a little video to...
In most ecosystems, energy flows through several different pathways. Each organism is part of several interlocking food chains which form a food web. This food web shows how energy moves through different pathways in our living machine.
Okay. And the last slide, I think this is the last slide. Yes, our last slide. This just shows different trophic levels. So we can look at these different energy levels here. And so down here are the producers. And when we look at the amount of energy in each of these blocks, the size of these blocks represents the amount of energy found at each of these levels. So notice the producers are the biggest block. They have the most amount of energy. So these guys are using the sun's energy, and they're making lots and lots and lots of food. They're making lots and lots of carbohydrates and other things. The herbivores are then coming along and eating the producers of the plants. And they're only getting a fraction of that energy, about 10%. From the producers. So some of the producers don't get eaten, some of the producers are making energy that doesn't go into like plant matter that the herbivores would even eat. And then again, these carnivores, small carnivores, are then eating these herbivores, and only 10% of the energy is transferred to the next level. And then finally these large carnivores at the top of the feeding chain, they're getting a small fraction. So if you notice, the slice of the energy that they're getting from the original is very, very small. As a result, we don't see tons and tons of trophic levels. You're never going to see like 10 trophic levels. 4 is pretty standard. 5 would be rare in a system, just because there's not enough energy to sustain a larger organism up here that's going to be eating from this level of the food chain. So that is our first objective: diagram the flow of energy and nutrition through an ecosystem using food webs and food chains. And showing the different trophic levels. Our next objective will be to analyze the function of nutrients in living things, and we're going to do that in the next lecture. Thank you.